Good Sunday morning. I'm KHUL Meteorologist Chris Ramirez, and we're starting off mostly sunny, warm and humid. Temperatures are in the 70s and 80s. 81 in Galveston, Tomball 75, Pearland at 75. We are under a weather impact alert for today. We could expect to see some isolated severe storms later this afternoon, and so that timing is going to be from noon till about 8 p.m. So any isolated storm that does flare up later today does have the potential for some large hail and some damaging winds. There is a low tornado risk, but we can't rule it completely out later today. So it's going to be that large hail threat that's going to be the threat for today. That's why the Storm Prediction Center is including a large portion of southeast Texas under that slight risk for severe weather. It's a 2 out of 5. So between 2 and 4, maybe even lasting until 5 to 6 p.m. as we're expecting to see that storm potential. As we look at radar right now across the state, this is as of 8 o'clock this morning, we're looking at an area of storms that's moving southward into North Texas. That has some heavy rain with it. Right now, they're not severe. We are in the early parts of the day, and so as we warm up, it's these storms that we're really going to have to keep an eye on as we head into this afternoon, because models are indicating that we could see some of these storms make their way south into southeast Texas and into portions of north and east of the Houston area. So the Storm Prediction Center, like I said, including us under a slight risk for severe weather. That does include a large portion of Harris County. It includes portions of North Houston. So anywhere along just north of I-10 will have that potential for some isolated strong storms later on today, as well as that hail threat where you see the hatched area. That's where we're expecting to see the risk for 2-inch or wider diameter hail with these storms. So future track, going into later today around 2 p.m., you might be looking at this map and you might be saying, Chris, why are you saying storms? This is just showing showers. Well, it's actually going to be these very lone cells that we're going to have to keep an eye on getting closer towards 2 to 3 p.m. because we could see, even though the isolated storm potential is not going to be as widespread, and even though the models are indicating that this is going to be towards the west of town, we cannot rule out one of these lone storms making it into the Houston area or closer to Houston as we head later into around 3 to 4 p.m. So it's very isolated in nature, but they could pack a major punch. And the thing to note here is that not everybody's going to receive rain, but it's not going to take much for a storm to become severe. And that's what they saw in Austin a few days ago. I don't know if y'all have paid attention to the news headlines where Austin, portions of North Austin, got very large hail, while the southern parts of the city didn't see anything at all. They remained clear and sunny. So isolated strong storms, something similar like we saw in Austin, but we can't really say it's going to happen in Houston. We just have to keep an eye that there's going to be a lone isolated storm somewhere north of I-10 that could become severe later on today, especially as we head towards the warmer parts of our day. So we have a stationary frontal boundary that's currently draped over North Texas. As we go through the next few days, we are expecting our next weather system to move through that could bring some rain chances into Wednesday and into Thursday. So expect scattered showers. I think models are indicating that this is going to remain north of Houston. We could see another frontal boundary move through. Depending on how far north or south that frontal boundary makes it, very well depends on whether or not we get that rain chance. For right now, we're seeing isolated showers for the middle of the week. But as we look at today, today's a very important day. Hurricane season beginning today, runs from June 1st through November 30th. If you haven't already, just make sure to have those action plans ready, as the peak of hurricane season is on September. That's when we've seen most of our storms affect the Gulf Coast, but that doesn't mean that they can't happen in June or July. We had Beryl last year that happened in early July. Even in 2001, we had Tropical Storm Allison that happened around June 8th or 9th. So now until November 30th, definitely expecting that tropical storm or hurricane potential in the Atlantic basin. Some important reminders: assemble supplies. Just have those action plans ready. Have, excess food and water. Have documentation of your medicines and prescriptions, batteries, phone chargers. Fill up your car. Make sure your cars are all filled up because it's not going to take much to spawn a storm or two as we head into the hurricane season months. So looking at that Atlantic Basin, no storms are expected over the next 7 days. Very good news. It's very quiet out there. We have a plume of Saharan dust that's going to be making its way across the Atlantic. It's going to move into the Caribbean by Tuesday of this week, but we are expecting some of this dust to move into the Gulf and eventually cause some hazy skies for us here across Southeast Texas heading into Friday. So if you have any lung sensitivity concerns, you might want to limit your time outdoors by the end of the week for Friday and Saturday, because things are going to look a bit hazy. If it haven't already, we were dealing with the agricultural fires from Mexico and Central America. Now we have the Saharan dust to worry about going into the end of the work week. So looking at the Atlantic Basin names, we've already had Alvin out on the Pacific side. That's a different set of names, but the Atlantic Basin, Andrea is the first name, Barry, Chantel, Dexter, Aaron, Fernand, Gabriel. We end with Sebastian, Tanya, Van, and Wendy. So hopefully we don't get through all of these names. But this is actually, fun fact, these are recycled from the names that were back in 2019. So a lot of times they recycle these names every few years if the storm has not made a tremendous impact. If the storm hasn't made a tremendous impact, of course, they retire those names like Harvey, Allison, but these are the recycled ones from back in 2019, if you've probably seen these names before. So looking at your 7-day forecast, highs in the 90s, lows in the 70s. We are expecting an isolated chance for storms today. That's why we're issuing that weather impact alert for today. We're going to keep that rain chance very isolated for Wednesday and into Thursday, but just keep in mind that we are expecting those conditions to remain mostly dry for the first half of our day. So we're issuing that weather impact alert for today. I know we're starting off mostly quiet across the Houston area, but we could see the potential for some of those storms to make their way through our area later on this afternoon between noon and 8 p.m. Any storm that does flare up, even if it's north of Houston, does have the potential for wind damage and large hail. And so keep that in mind if you are traveling north of Houston towards Dallas. Large hail is going to be that primary threat. Wind damage still up there. Very low tornado risk, a low flooding risk. So any storm that does flare up, we're not going to see widespread rain potential like we saw a few days ago, but we are expecting that rain chance and that storm potential to be a bit elevated as we get closer towards the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock hours, when we get up into the 90s for some of our areas. So, like I said, to kind of recap what I've been talking about is that we're looking at that radar. Storms moving through North Texas. These were in central Oklahoma. These are moving quite fast. And so as we look closer, heavy rain moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They are expecting a portion of this area and these storms to become severe as we head into the next couple of hours. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to have to keep an eye on these storms as they move through Dallas-Fort Worth, because models are indicating that these could move southward along I-45 into closer towards Houston later on this afternoon. So it's these storms that we're watching today, and that's the reason why we're under that weather impact alert for today, because the Storm Prediction Center is also including a large portion of Southeast Texas under a slight risk, a 2 out of 5. Any storm that does flare up is going to have the potential for some large hail and damaging winds. And so where you see that hatched area north of I-10 includes Liberty, Livingston, Huntsville, Conroe, Tomball, Navasota, even Brenham, does have the risk for 2-inch diameter hail or larger for today. And so Future Track, showing you Future Track once again to kind of stress the importance of the models. We could see it's not widespread, but just keep in mind, lone isolated severe storms are possible later on this afternoon. And so even though it's not widespread, just keep in mind that it's going to be these lone storms that could pack a major punch and have that hail damaging wind potential. So not everybody's going to receive rain and not everybody's going to receive a severe storm, but just keep in mind that it's going to take not much to spawn those storms off as we head into later this afternoon. And eventually, as we get closer towards 8, 9 o'clock later today, we are expecting that rain chance to diminish heading into the latter hours of Monday. So very isolated nature heading into the week. Another weather system moving through by midweek. Frontal boundary likely to still move across Texas. Model we could see, depending on how far north or south, that's that cold front. You're able to see where that rain is. That's a cold front that might not make it to Houston. So it's not really going to give us cooler temperatures, but it could bring some isolated rain chances heading into Wednesday and Thursday. Monday, Tuesday looking more dry, but Wednesday, Thursday is going to be the next chance for those showers heading into the middle of the week. Hurricane season beginning today, runs from now into November 30th. Peak of hurricane seasons in September. September is when we've had significant hurricanes. We had Hurricane Ike back in 2008. But just keep in mind, we've seen storms out in June and in July heading into hurricane season. So similar supplies, food, water, medicine, prescriptions, batteries, phone chargers. No storms expected for the next 7 days as dust, Saharan dust, these waves off of Africa, sending dust across the Atlantic. It's actually monsoonal season out in Africa. And so what usually happens is that when you have these big storms happening over the Saharan desert, that sends a lot of that dust out into the Atlantic Ocean and across into the Caribbean, moving into the Gulf of Mexico, and eventually moving into Southeast Texas, which we could see some hazy skies by Friday of this week and lasting through the weekend. And that could lower some air quality levels going into the next few days there. So 7-day forecast, just to sort of recap: highs in the 90s, lows in the 70s, weather impact alert for today. And I can't stress this enough, even though not everybody is going to receive a storm today, we very well could see some very small, isolated, severe storms later this afternoon, especially as we warm up into the 90s, at least by 3 to 4 p.m. So keep your eyes peeled on these storms. If you see dark clouds, just keep in mind that that very well could be a severe storm heading towards you, and you might want to just get indoors because there is a large hail threat with it. You don't want to have your cars ruined. I've been a victim of hail damage to a car. It is not fun to deal with. Highs in the 90s, lows in the 70s, and we are expecting our next chance for showers heading into Wednesday and Thursday of this coming week. It's going to be very isolated in nature. We could see maybe a storm or two by Wednesday and Thursday, but it's just going to be muggy and warm. Unfortunately, temperatures warming up into the upper 90s by Saturday, feeling much more like summer. And as always, you can find the latest weather forecast on KHOU.com and on the KHOU 11 app. We are tracking the latest. We're watching these storms for you. Download the KHOU 11 app because you can get alerts and notifications on if a storm is impacting the Houston area. Again, I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Chris Ramirez with your extended forecast. Have a great and safe rest of your Sunday.